Hi, you guys. I'm Ben. I want to apologize for the lighting and the weird setup. I'm at my father's right now. I went from Bloomington to Ohio, back to Bloomington to grab this book, and I'm now in Nifley, Kentucky, making this video. So, let's just go right in. We read three chapters, and I I found the conclusions really helpful because it kind of helped to guide for me the main ideas, the things to elaborate on, and the definitions to look at when explaining these chapters. So I went ahead and pulled right out of the conclusion. I have literacy as material, literacy as social practice, the integral role of culture, community, and identity, literacy in space, literacy in time, and multimodal literacies, and I kind of want to look at every single one of these. Materiality, the book defined as the stuff we use to make text. This can be, I believe, posters, magazines, um, artifacts like the book had talked about, um, anything that I think we get meaning from. The book I describe literacy as a way of making meaning. Um, and I think that if we can get meaning out of any object, any material thing, that it can count as something, a text or a form of literacy. It describes social practice as cultural patterns and forms inscribed into everyday lives. For example, eating breakfast. I think that this begins to tie into chapter 3 when it talks about home literacy. I know growing up, we had routine conversations in my family. My father would say the exact same thing um, to wake my sister and I up, or whenever we would walk outside the door for the bus, or if our mother took us to school, we would have the same songs and music every single morning, or prayers in the evening would be the exact same prayer over and over and over, and it was a family designed thing, and it kind of formed in a way for me my idea of literacy when dealing with my family and my parents individually. Um, what's valued, what's not, what type of language is used, and what type of setting. Um, and whenever I say setting, I think the proper term to use would be space. And the book described space as an area in which something takes place. It can be real, it can be imagined, such as something like a chat room. And I don't have social media except for professional Twitter. And I constantly think about, okay, so now I'm on the internet and I can be found. I can have future employers, current employers, friends, other professionals look at what I have and what I post and make a general understanding about me as a person. It is a very real form, in my opinion, even if it's an imagined idea. And in this space, I have a set of literary skills which is professional, or that I'm trying to uphold and keep, versus if I'm doing something like keeping a diary. Um, some of you know that I study Russian and French as languages, and I try to keep diaries in each languages. And depending on what my skills are or how I feel, that they may be more professional than the other, older, more modern, very repetitive of words, not repetitive. Um, I think that ties into chapter 3 too, just the multilingual um, type of literacy. And I think that it's important to think of identity expression and the fluidity of literacy and writing and identity expression, and tie this into the synesthesia, I think is how that word is going to be pronounced, that was brought up in chapter 2. That writing that can connect to emotion, history, past, culture. I guess history and past are the same thing. Physical sense in some way. The type of writing that makes students care about what they're writing, or the type of text that they care about reading. You actually begin to see their real literacy skills come out. The book had defined synesthesia as the blurring of different modes into one another. For example, seeing words as colors. I kind of get it. I'd be curious to know what your all's thoughts are. If you guys have any different examples, I think of I work in a children's library, and whenever I am shelving or see some children's books that I read as a kid, I begin to associate them with my mother's voice, or I associate them with my childhood bedroom and the settings and the feelings that I had when I was a kid. I'm now associating with that book. Um, I think that's what they mean by that. There's a lot of multimodal words, multimodality, multimodal literacy. I just went ahead and summed up to multimodal as many modes of literary expression. So this can be physical text, digital texts, film, media, video games. I'm sure the list can go on and on. I have trouble thinking of them because I've always thought of literacy as, I guess, hard text. I've never been one to meet into the modern age of our understanding of text, but I'm trying. I think that's important. Chapter 2 talked a lot about affordances and constraints. Affordances being the possibilities that a particular form offers a text maker, and constraints being the thing that stops text from being functional. So I think the affordances and constraints are important when we're thinking about lessons and our plans and the type of media and literacy devices we're bringing into the classroom. If, let's say in a secondary English class, if the lesson is on some Shakespearean play, it may be useful to bring in a movie version or to bring in props and have the students act out some of the parts. It makes it more real. It puts different emotions, gives a different idea on it. And these forms of literary expression, these artifacts, let's call them, can be useful. I think that a constraint on something like this would be just a read-along. I think it's important to have the students read these play parts and just to listen to some person in some old English accent reading these professionally. I think that it would lose the value. So I think those are the type of things we need to think about when we're thinking of what the affordances and the constraints. I mentioned artifacts maybe just 30 seconds ago, and I really liked all the examples of artifacts that Chapter 2 and even Chapter 3 had brought in, and how much students seemed to care in the examples, how much they cared about talking about them, how it identified them, what others thought of their artifacts, and the way that it implied to them. I think that whenever I'm doing openings in classrooms or the break the ice activities, having students bring in an artifact and talk about it, maybe the first 1 or 2 days, I think would be a great way to understand their identity, what they value, their true literary skills, how they speak about it, the words they use, their tone. I think making note of that can really allow us to get to know our students and the students to get to know one another. And it talked about how text should be viewed as artifacts because of their purpose, production, and audience reaction. I kind of struggled wrapping my mind around this one. I do think that we need to always think about who the audience is, what the author's trying to say, what is their purpose and goal, why they chose a certain medium that they did. I think that comes down to what, once again, the lesson. Are we wanting the students to think about the production itself? Maybe they're learning about writing or working with them on their own production. But if it's analyzing, say, a poem, for example, the production they chose, if they wrote it on a tablet versus typed it versus wrote it in a diary, I think that begins stretching a bit for the purpose of the poem. If we're thinking of new criticism and literary criticism, what's on the page is what you have to work with. It's not necessarily fair to look at the author's past or try to connect it to something that they had. You got to work with what you have, and I'm a supporter of that. Summing it up, going into chapter 3, I really, really liked the chart on page 59. If you guys don't have your books with you, but they're close, I'd say grab it and maybe open it up and look with me. That's the chart that broke up literacy at home and at school, and trying to get to that tier 4, or that quadrant 3 part of the graph, looking at diverse home and school literacies, mixing them together, integrating them. The book had mentioned a third form, linking home and school literacy, and I tried making something like that in my Picto chart. I think that's how you pronounce it. I think that this is the most difficult part whenever we're thinking of lesson plans and getting students involved, because all students use different forms of media, and even us as educators, we use different forms of media. We may be more likely to blog or have things like teacher websites and e-portfolios, maybe something just Facebook. Whenever students have things of Pinterest and Tumblr and whatever new social medias are being made right now, and trying to keep up can be difficult, but I think understanding the underlining value and basis of what they are. It is a form of non-professional, generally among students, communication with one another. They can view multitudes of their peers in minutes. What's important to them, the way they speak, and their own literary expression. The book had looked at ethnography as being a very, very vital way of looking at this, and defined ethnography as the study of cultural identities and worlds, which focuses on ways of recording those cultural identities and standing away and drawing close to the experience. That definition was very broad to me. When I think of ethnography, I really think of the opening of chapter 1 when that child, what was his name? Winston Charlebon had wrote his letter wanting to get accepted into college on being from Haiti and his family coming from that area, and really connected with applying it to his future aspiration for wanting to diversify things, wanting to bring diversity to other people, and reached into his emotions and showed those, made it vulnerable through his literary skills to make me vulnerable in my emotions. And just great writing, and it mattered to him. He used his ethnography or ethnographical skills. I don't know how you'd relate it to, I don't even know what part of speech that is to however he felt about it on the inside. And us examining that, I guess, would be the ethnography itself. I'd say that's summing up what I want to share with you guys. These were the main points that stuck out to me, things to think about, things that I'm currently thinking about, trying to introduce to students and designing lesson plans, and as we have our assignment due coming up on the 29th, how I can use the examples brought about in the book and the activities to inspire what I'm thinking about doing. So thank you guys for watching. I'm sorry that it's so long. I'm sorry about the weird lighting. Take care, you guys.